Disney is often remembered as the kingdom of magic, innocence, and happy endings. But behind the shimmering castle lies a vault of forgotten shadows. Did you know some Disney cartoons were so controversial that they were pulled, buried, or quietly erased from history? Tonight, we're unlocking the vault. Here are 12 Disney cartoons the company desperately wants you to forget. 1. Song of the South, 1946. When it premiered in 1946, Song of the South was hailed as a technical marvel. Audiences were mesmerized by its blend of live action and animation, particularly the unforgettable Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah sequence, which won an Academy Award. But even in its own time, the film faced backlash. Critics accused Disney of romanticizing plantation life and downplaying the brutality of slavery. The controversy stems from its depiction of Uncle Remus, a kindly black storyteller who recounts African American folk tales. While beloved by some for his warmth, others argued he represented a dangerous stereotype that sanitized centuries of oppression. Disney executives quietly buried the film in the US, never releasing it on home video, despite frequent fan demand. Behind the scenes, Walt Disney himself was caught between admiration for Joel Chandler Harris's folklore and growing criticism from the NAACP. The company wrestled with whether the film should remain part of Disney's legacy or be left to rot in the vault. To this day, Song of the South has never seen an official US release, though its characters still echo in Disney parks, particularly through the former Splash Mountain ride. It remains the most infamous example of Disney's attempt to erase a chapter of its own storytelling. In burying it, Disney only deepened the mystery. 2. Der Fuhrer's Face, 1943. In the midst of World War II, Disney took an unexpected turn. Instead of princesses and fairy tales, audiences were treated to Donald Duck in Der Fuhrer's Face, a wartime propaganda cartoon unlike anything Disney had done before. The short shows Donald in a surreal nightmare where he is forced to work in a Nazi munitions factory. The film was both shocking and effective. It used satire, grotesque imagery, and biting caricatures of Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito to hammer home its message. It even won an Academy Award for Best Animated Short in 1943. But while patriotic at the time, Disney soon found itself uncomfortable with the cartoon's legacy. Why? Because Donald Duck, the lovable everyman, was briefly dressed in a Nazi uniform, shouting, "Heil Hitler." Though clearly satirical, the images proved too jarring for future generations. Disney quietly shelved the cartoon, making it hard to find until much later home video releases. Behind the scenes, the studio poured much of its wartime resources into propaganda, producing dozens of shorts for the US government. But none had the same surreal, nightmarish tone as Der Fuhrer's Face. It remains both a historical artifact and an uncomfortable reminder that even Disney wasn't immune to war's propaganda machine. In its attempt to fight evil, Disney created an image it would later wish audiences could unsee. 3. Education for Death, The Making of the Nazi, 1943. If Der Fuhrer's Face was biting satire, Education for Death was pure tragedy. This rarely seen Disney short follows a young German boy named Hans as he grows up under Nazi indoctrination. From fairy tales twisted into fascist propaganda to classroom lessons teaching blind obedience, the film paints a chilling portrait of how children could be molded into soldiers of hate. Unlike Disney's usual family-friendly tone, Education for Death is dark, somber, and deeply unsettling. There are no happy songs, no comedic sidekicks, only a grim message about the cost of indoctrination. For audiences in 1943, it was a powerful warning. But for Disney's image as a magical storyteller, it was disastrous. The studio quietly locked the film away after the war. Unlike Donald Duck's propaganda outings, this short had little rewatch value and struck too close to real historical horrors. Over time, it became one of the most buried films in Disney's history. Behind the scenes, animators recalled how the project weighed on them. Instead of whimsical characters, they were tasked with animating marching soldiers, Nazi youth, and the grim machinery of dictatorship. Some later admitted it was one of the darkest projects they ever touched at Disney. Today, Education for Death is a haunting artifact of an era when even Disney set aside dreams for a chilling reality. It's a film that proves even cartoons can carry the weight of nightmares. 4. The Three Little Pigs, 1933. When Disney released The Three Little Pigs during the Great Depression, it was hailed as a masterpiece. Audiences loved its catchy song, "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf?", which became an anthem of resilience in hard times. The short was an instant sensation, winning an Academy Award and cementing Disney's reputation for blending humor, music, and heart. But hidden in this classic was a detail Disney later wished audiences would forget. In its original release, the Big Bad Wolf disguised himself as a Jewish peddler, complete with a large nose and stereotypical clothing. While it was meant as slapstick comedy, the imagery fed into anti-Semitic caricatures common in the 1930s popular culture. Almost immediately, Jewish organizations protested. Disney faced pressure to edit the scene, and by the time the film was re-released, the wolf's disguise was changed to a more generic Fuller Brushman figure. For decades, this controversy was quietly swept under the rug, mentioned only in academic circles or rare archival screenings. Behind the scenes, Walt Disney himself reportedly agreed to the edits, understanding the damage such depictions could cause to his studio's reputation. Still, the fact that a beloved cartoon once included such imagery remains a stain on the company's history. Today, most audiences only know the edited version, unaware of the original controversy. Yet, for those who dig into Disney's past, The Three Little Pigs serves as a reminder that even seemingly innocent fairy tales can carry the weight of cultural insensitivity. The Big Bad Wolf may have been reanimated for future generations, but the shadow of his first disguise still lingers. 5. Fantasia, 1940. When Fantasia premiered in 1940, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Combining classical music with breathtaking animation, it was Disney's boldest artistic experiment. While audiences marveled at dancing mushrooms, broomsticks, and cosmic journeys, one segment would later spark outrage. In the Pastoral Symphony sequence, a group of centaurs prances in idyllic landscapes. Among them was a character named Sunflower, a black centaurette with exaggerated features who served as a maid to the lighter-skinned centaurs. She polished hooves, braided tails, and generally reinforced racial stereotypes that were already pervasive in Hollywood. For decades, few noticed. But by the 1960s, as civil rights movements gained momentum, Disney recognized how damaging Sunflower's depiction was. The studio quietly cut her from re-releases, cropping or altering frames so that she vanished entirely. By the 1990s, her existence was practically erased from mainstream versions of the film. Still, rare archival prints and collector footage exposed her presence, sparking heated debate among Disney fans and historians. Should these depictions be preserved as cultural artifacts, or should they remain hidden to protect audiences from harmful imagery? Disney's choice was clear: erase and move on. Behind the scenes, animators admitted Sunflower reflected the era's casual racism rather than the deliberate malice. But intent doesn't erase impact. Today, Fantasia is celebrated as a masterpiece, but also haunted by the ghost of a character Disney would rather the world forget. In trying to paint a symphony of beauty, Disney unintentionally revealed the biases woven into its brushstrokes. 6. Victory Through Air Power, 1943. In the thick of World War II, Walt Disney released a feature unlike any other in his career, Victory Through Air Power. Based on a book by aviation advocate Alexander de Seversky, the film argued that air superiority was the key to defeating the Axis powers. Half documentary, half animated lecture, it shocked audiences who expected whimsical entertainment. At first, critics didn't know what to make of it. Some praised Disney's boldness, others accused him of turning his studio into a propaganda machine. The film contained frightening depictions of bombing campaigns, maps covered in swastikas, and dramatic visuals of enemy cities reduced to rubble. Unlike Donald Duck's propaganda shorts, this was serious, persuasive advocacy. Behind the scenes, Walt Disney himself was deeply invested in the project. He believed in Seversky's vision and even showed the film to high-ranking military officials. Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt reportedly viewed the movie together, and some historians argue it influenced Allied strategy. But once the war ended, Disney buried it. The images of burning cities and lectures on military dominance clashed with the company's family-friendly image. For decades, victory through air power remained virtually unseen, whispered about as Disney's most uncharacteristic production. Today it stands as proof that Disney was more than just a dream factory. At times, it was a weapon of persuasion. While groundbreaking in its own right, the film's uncomfortable marriage of war and animation ensured that Disney locked it away. It's a reminder that even the brightest storytellers are not immune to the darkest chapters of history. 7. Coal Black and the Sebben Dwarfs, 1943. While technically not a direct Walt Disney production, this Warner Brothers short is often tied to Disney's shadow because it parodied Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Its inclusion here reflects Disney's uneasy relationship with contemporaries who borrowed and twisted its formulas. Coal Black reimagined the fairy tale with an all-black cast of characters, drawn in grotesque caricature. At the time, the short was marketed as jazzy and hip, set to lively swing music. But in reality, it leaned heavily on offensive stereotypes, including exaggerated lips, minstrel-style humor, and language designed to mock African-American speech patterns. Audiences in the 1940s laughed, but even then, civil rights groups condemned the cartoon. The NAACP called it vicious and offensive, demanding it be withdrawn. Warner Brothers quietly shelved it, and Disney, though not responsible, felt the sting of association. Why? Because Coal Black mirrored the very formula Disney had pioneered, a princess tale filled with whimsical sidekicks and musical numbers. For Disney, this parody was a double wound. It highlighted how successful their stories had become, while also forcing uncomfortable questions about the racial undertones lurking in the industry. Over the years, Disney distanced itself from any mention of the short, but historians have long connected the dots, noting how Snow White's cultural shadow enabled such a racially charged reinterpretation. Today, Coal Black is studied as a relic of Hollywood's racist past, a cartoon Disney wishes had never borrowed from its fairy tale crown. It's a reminder that Disney's legacy didn't exist in isolation. It shaped and was reshaped by an industry with darker impulses. 8. Mickey's Mellerdrammer, 1933. Mickey Mouse has always been Disney's symbol of innocence, but in 1933, he starred in one of the studio's most uncomfortable productions, Mickey's Mellerdrammer. The short featured Mickey and his friends performing a play adaptation of Uncle Tom's Cabin. The problem? They wore blackface. At the time, minstrel shows were still part of American entertainment, and Disney leaned into that tradition. Mickey, beloved by millions, smeared his face with shoe polish to portray a black character. What was framed as comedy in the 1930s is now recognized as one of the most insensitive moments in the studio's history. The short was screened widely during its release, but by the 1960s, Disney executives quietly buried it. Unlike Song of the South, which at least contained full musical sequences still admired by fans, Mickey's Mellerdrammer had little to redeem it. The film was quietly struck from distribution lists, omitted from retrospectives, and remains largely unseen except in rare academic archives. Behind the scenes, animators of the era didn't question the decision. They saw blackface as a standard comedic device. But decades later, the Disney brand faced mounting pressure to reckon with these choices. Critics argued that burying the short was less about accountability and more about hiding an uncomfortable truth. For Disney fans who stumble across still frames or grainy clips, the sight of Mickey Mouse in blackface feels jarring, almost unthinkable. Yet it's a reminder that even icons can be stained by the times in which they were created. 9. The Martins and the Coys, 1946, tucked away inside the beloved anthology Make Mine Music, was a segment Disney would later regret. The Martins and the Coys was a slapstick retelling of a violent mountain feud, complete with gunfire, moonshine, and family rivalry. Narrated with jaunty folk songs, it played violence for laughs, at least in 1946. Audiences at the time chuckled, but post-war America was already growing uneasy with how children consumed images of gunplay. By the time the film reached later generations, The Martins and the Coys was singled out as dangerously inappropriate. Disney's solution: remove it entirely from most re-releases of Make Mine music. In some home video editions, the segment is missing altogether, creating a strange gap for modern viewers. Behind the scenes, animators recalled the piece was meant as a parody of American folk legends, inspired by real Appalachian feuds. But the blend of cartoon humor with constant shooting and death struck many as tone-deaf in hindsight. Critics in later decades argued that Disney had unwittingly glorified reckless violence in a film marketed to children. The controversy wasn't just about guns, it was also about the ending. The feud resolves not through peace, but with more chaos, implying that even marriage couldn't end cycles of revenge. That moral sat uneasily with Disney's later happily ever after reputation. Today, The Martins and the Coys is one of the most frequently cut Disney shorts, surviving only in full archival editions. Its disappearance is proof that Disney isn't only hiding racially insensitive works, it also wants to erase films that clash with its carefully curated image of gentle family entertainment. 10. The Jungle Book, 1967. On the surface, The Jungle Book was a triumphant farewell to Walt Disney, the last film he personally oversaw before his death. Audiences adored Baloo, Bagheera, and the hypnotic songs that made it an instant classic. Yet beneath its cheerful surface lies a controversy Disney has wrestled with ever since. The character of King Louie, an orangutan who sings jazz and scats with wild energy, was originally voiced by Louis Prima, a white Italian-American musician. Critics later argued the choice reinforced racial stereotypes by associating African-American jazz culture with a monkey. Though not intended as malicious, the implications troubled scholars and civil rights groups, particularly in the decades after the film's release. Disney executives defended the character as comic relief, pointing out that Louis wasn't in Rudyard Kipling's original book at all, but was created for the film. Still, the shadow lingered. When Jon Favreau remade The Jungle Book in 2016, King Louie was reimagined with Christopher Walken as a brooding, mobster-like giant ape, an attempt to dodge the original's associations. Behind the scenes, animators in the 1960s saw Louie as their chance to animate a full-swing jazz number, one of the most elaborate sequences of the film. They poured their hearts into the scene, never anticipating that decades later, it would become a lightning rod for racial discourse. Today, The Jungle Book is still celebrated, but King Louie's legacy continues to stir debate. What was once seen as playful now feels like a relic of Hollywood's blind spots. It's proof that even Disney's most beloved films carry complications the company would rather brush aside. 11. Saludos Amigos, 1942. During World War II, Disney became a tool of diplomacy. Funded in part by the U.S. government's Good Neighbor policy, Saludos Amigos sent Mickey, Donald, and Goofy to South America to foster goodwill. The film was praised at first. It premiered in Rio de Janeiro before New York, and seemed like a colorful love letter to Latin American culture. But over time, critics began to see the cracks. While meant to celebrate Latin America, the cartoon often fell into stereotypes. Donald Duck bumbled his way through Peru, portrayed as clueless in the face of local customs. Jose Carioca, the Brazilian parrot, was introduced as a suave companion, but critics argued his depiction leaned into caricature more than authenticity. Behind the scenes, Disney artists actually traveled to South America as part of a goodwill tour. They sketched landscapes, absorbed music, and interacted with locals. Yet, when the drawings came back to the studio, cultural nuance was filtered through a Hollywood lens. Some Latin American audiences felt flattered, but others saw it as oversimplification, a glossy postcard version of their culture for U.S. propaganda purposes. Disney rarely re-releases Saludos Amigos today, overshadowed by its flashier follow-up, The Three Caballeros. But historians continue to point to it as an example of how Disney blurred entertainment and politics, often at the expense of authenticity. What was meant as a bridge between nations instead feels like a relic of cultural tourism, a film Disney quietly shelves whenever the subject arises. 12. The Three Caballeros, 1944. If Saludos Amigos raised eyebrows, its sequel, The Three Caballeros, practically exploded with controversy. Marketed as a cheerful celebration of Latin American culture, the film followed Donald Duck as he journeyed with Jose Carioca and Panchito Pistoles, a Mexican rooster, through a kaleidoscope of song, dance, and surreal animation. Audiences in 1944 were dazzled by its inventive style, but for many, the film's cultural depictions felt like a double-edged sword. While some viewers appreciated seeing Latin music and landscapes in a Hollywood cartoon, others criticized the exaggerated stereotypes. Panchito's gunslinging antics and Donald's wide-eyed pursuit of Latin women left lasting discomfort. Behind the scenes, Disney was under pressure. The U.S. government wanted films that promoted unity with Latin America during wartime. But in trying to appeal to audiences, the studio ended up flattening complex cultures into caricature. Even Walt Disney himself admitted privately that the film's chaotic mix of slapstick, surrealism, and diplomacy may have gone too far. Later generations found the cartoon especially troubling in how it portrayed Donald Duck. Once the lovable everyman, Donald was now depicted as lustful and undignified, chasing women across animated and live-action sequences. Parents who once trusted Disney for wholesome entertainment felt betrayed by the tone. Today, The Three Caballeros exists in a strange limbo, admired for its bold animation, but remembered for its cultural missteps. Disney has never fully embraced it in marketing, often leaving it as a footnote in the company's history. For many, it's the perfect symbol of Disney's forgotten vault, where artistry collides with controversy, and where the magic was never as innocent as it seemed. Disney built its kingdom on magic, but its vault holds shadows the company hopes we'll forget. These controversial cartoons remind us that even the brightest dreams are born in complicated times. Which one shocked you the most? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation.